Hi, in this video we are going to go over our selection tool worksheet as sort of a build up to our next project, which is a collage about you. So if you open this up in Classroom, yours should look kind of similar to the window we're looking at right now. This is not your actual classroom, but it's a very similar one. But anyway, in there you should see the selection tool worksheet. Click on the name of that worksheet. When you do that, it should open it up in a window. One of the options that you have right here is to right click and go to Save Image As. If you do that, the quality of a file that you get downloaded when you do that is a lot lower than if you do it the way I show you. For this project, it's not going to be a big deal, but for future projects, I would definitely recommend that you do not do that this way. You do it a different way. So like I said, it won't be a big deal for this project, but for other future projects it will be a big deal. So just get in the habit of doing going about this the same way as I am right now. So in the upper right hand corner you should see three dots that says More Actions. Go ahead and click on those dots and open a new window. When you do that, right here in the upper right hand corner you should see this download button. Go ahead and click on the download. And then in the bottom of my screen here, it shows that it's downloaded. What I generally do is I drag this to my desktop now and leave it there along with 85 million other things. But then I kind of organize them from there. So I drag it to my desktop. It's just kind of easier for me sometimes. You can do that way, or you can do it a different way. If you got it saved to your downloads, just go to File, Open, and then go ahead and navigate to your downloads or wherever you placed it. Mine's on the desktop. I could drag it in there, but I'll just go this way and hit Open, and it should open right up. Okay, so this is a PNG file, which Photoshop should open up without a problem. So here is our little worksheet. We're going to go through this a little bit together. So what I would recommend you do is you open this up and have your video open, and then you watch a little bit of the video, go through one of the steps, pause the video, go back to your worksheet, work on that part, and then keep continuing on through the worksheet. That way you don't watch the whole video all in one chunk, because who wants to listen to my voice for that long, for one thing, but also it gives you a chance to practice as we go along. That way you should be able to complete all of this no problem. This is a really simple worksheet, and I don't do a lot of worksheets in this class, but here this is a situation where I think it's a good idea to do one, so we're going to do one. Hopefully it's helpful to you. It should be. Okay, so we are working with our selection tools. We're going to use those a lot when we get to our big project that we're going to be working on next, the collage about you. So it's good to be familiar with all of those tools. So your selection tools are kind of these top, not the first one because that's your move tool. So that one moves everything around, right? So if you want to move something, select your move tool. But these three here are your selection tools. Right in here are your kind of shape selection tools, so your rectangular and elliptical marquees. Those other ones I never use, honestly. Single row and single column I never never use. You might find a use for them. I don't have one yet. But then these lasso tools will be helpful, as will the quick selection tool and the magic wand tool. So we're going to go ahead and start with this top one. So we're going to choose our rectangular marquee tool, and all you need to do to start out with, start right here over the green box and just trace the outline of that green box. So if you're zoomed out kind of like we are right now, you can get pretty accurate but not super accurate. So what we're going to do is zoom in. So hitting Control and the plus on your keyboard zooms you in. So I'm zoomed in, but I'm not in the right spot, right? A good way to move around in your document is pressing and holding the space bar till you get that little hand, and now I can pull around in my document. That's called panning, and it's super useful. So I just moved back up to my marquee tools, and I'm in the right spot. So you can see now my selection was kind of accurate but not exactly on, so I'm going to Control D, which is deselect. You can also get to that through here, select and deselect. Again, I'm working on a Mac, so it looks a little bit different. But now that I'm zoomed in, I can get a little bit more accurate with my selection. So I'm going to make a selection right over those dotted lines. So right like that, and then I will release my mouse button, and now I have that selection made. So it's sort of just, it created a selection, but it didn't do anything with it. So now we need to tell it what to do with it. And what we want it to do is we want to fill that space that we just created. So we created a rectangle, or the space for a rectangle, but we didn't actually create the rectangle yet, if that makes any sense. So what we're going to do to create the rectangle is hit this new layer button right there, and then we're going to fill it with a color. So I'll just click on my color swatches here, and I will choose that color right there. Looks good. Hit OK, and I'm going to choose my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to dump some paint in there. So as you can see, or maybe you can or cannot see, but there are still marching ants, or those kind of dotted moving lines around that rectangle that I created, because that selection is still active. To deselect it, I'm going to hit Control D on the keyboard again, or select and deselect. Getting to it up here is perfectly fine too. Okay, so now I have a rectangle made. Right there is my rectangle. I can move it wherever I want. I'm going to leave it there for now. I made it on a new layer, so when I move that, I can move it separately from my background layer. That's important. If I had made that rectangle right on my background layer, then I wouldn't be able to move it separately. They would be sort of merged together. Okay, so the next thing you need to do now, now that you know how to make rectangles, is make some more rectangles. So again, I am going to create a rectangle using my rectangular selection tool, a rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to fill it in with, I'll go with sort of an ombre effect here. So we'll go from light to dark. So again, I made the selection, filled it with color, hit deselect. Switch to your move tool just to sort of reset. And then now select marquee tool. The move tool is helpful if you just need to sort of reset. There are some times that you need to do that, and the move tool kind of helps you do that. Okay, I'm making another rectangle. I'll fill that with slightly darker color, paint bucket, dump some in there. Control D to deselect, select my move tool to reset, rectangular marquee tool, and I'll make one more rectangle. Notice I haven't made a new layer for all of these. I'm putting all my rectangles on the same layer. So you can do the same thing. So we'll go just about like that and dump some more paint in there. Control D to deselect that again. So now you notice all 4 of those rectangles are all on the same layer, but that layer is different from that background layer. So keep that worksheet layer separate. And again, good practice to get into is naming your layers. So name those rectangles. Perfect. All right, we are going to go ahead and move on to the next section. So we're going to move over, pressing and holding the spacebar, clicking and dragging over. And there we go. Okay, so now I am going to use my magic wand tool, now that we've kind of mastered the rectangle, right? So just to kind of step back a little bit, I made these rectangles using the rectangular marquee tool. There would have been an easier way to do this, and that would be to choose my rectangle tool, and all I need to do there is click and drag out a rectangle, and it fills it with color and kind of does everything in one step. That would be how I would draw probably a normal rectangle shape. We are practicing using our selection tools because we are going to need those tools for other things throughout this project. And that's why we're using those selection tools instead of using just our shape tools. I just want you to practice using the selection tools and get better at using them before we jump into the project. But that's not to say that if you were going to do this where you create rectangles, you'd probably use the rectangle tool. So just because of what we're doing and working our way up to, that's why we're doing that this way. But just to be aware, that's not necessarily the project or the tool that you would use for this kind of thing in general. Okay, sorry, just a little side note there. All right, so magic wand tools. So now I'm going to skip over this lasso one for right now. We'll come back to that, and we're going to choose this magic wand tool. So it's right in there. And now the area I want to select is the inside of this cloud. So I'm going to click on the inside of the cloud. So when I did that, I don't know if you can really see, but you'll notice that my marching ants went out around, I'm going to zoom out, went out around my entire worksheet with the exception of these little rectangles here. It did that because of the active layer that I'm working on right now. So my active layer right now is my rectangle layer. So that's why it selected everything except those rectangles that I had just made. So I'm going to Control D to deselect, and now I'm going to click back on my background layer. So that's the active layer right now. I'm going to zoom back in, and pan up a little bit. And now I'm going to click on the inside of my cloud, and now you can see my little marching ants are around the inside of my cloud and not the big worksheet itself. So that's exactly what you want. But now I have that selection created, but I need to create a new layer and fill that with a color. We'll keep everything in the blue theme today. You can choose whatever color you want though. Okay, so sort of that grayish greenish blue is in there, and that's the exact shape we need. I'm going to Control D to deselect it. That's all you need to do for that one. Okay, I'm going to choose my move tool again, press and hold with my space bar, and click and drag around in there. Okay, so the next one we're going to work on is this adding to selections one. So we're back up with our marquee tools, elliptical marquee tool. Okay, so my elliptical marquee tool makes ovals and circles, right? I'm going to deselect that. Okay. If I press and hold the shift key, it constrains the proportions of that circle, right? So I'm pressing and holding my shift key right now, clicking and dragging out with my mouse, and now it's a perfect circle. I can't flatten it. If I release my shift key, it flattens. All right, just so you know. The other thing is that shift key works most of the time, but sometimes when you're adding to your selections, it doesn't work. So one way to get around that is come up here in your options bar. Again, that's my active tool right now, my elliptical marquee tool. That's what I want. So when I have that active, now I have these options up here. If I have a different tool, if I have that tool selected, again, that doesn't work very well. If I have my paint bucket selected, I don't have my options for my elliptical marquee tool. Okay, these are specific to the tool that is active at the time. So again, back to the elliptical marquee tool, I have my options for my elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to come up here in style and set it to fixed ratio. That way, whether or not I'm holding the shift key, right now I'm not holding the shift key, but I'm clicking and dragging out with my mouse, it's constraining those proportions. So that's what I want for this. Okay, I'm going to deselect that one, and we are going to start right here in this middle Mickey Mouse area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag out with my mouse to about the size that I need. So that's about the size that I need, but it's not in the right spot. So while my mouse button is still pressed in, I'm going to press and hold the space bar, and I'm going to move that guy over. If I had released my mouse before I moved it over with the space bar, I wouldn't be able to move it over with the space bar. So I'm going to step back again, Control D to deselect. So again, clicking and dragging with the mouse, let's say I made my circle. Now I can't press the space bar and move that over. I'm moving the whole thing over. Okay, so that only works while you're creating that shape. So in the process of creating the shape, you can press and hold the space bar button, and that will allow you to move that shape that you're making. So I'm going to Command D again. I'll do that one more time. So click and drag out with my mouse to about the size that I want. It's not quite in the right spot, so keeping my mouse button pressed in, I'm going to press and hold my space bar and kind of slide that guy over. So that's right about where I need it. Okay, and now up here in my options bar, notice these first few. So what we had selected was new selection. Okay, so that's what we were doing with all these other ones. So when we made our rectangles and everything like that, we were doing add or new selection. I'm going to choose now add to selection. So that we will use quite a bit, and the subtract from selection we'll use quite a bit. This next one we won't use a whole lot, but maybe a little bit. But anyway, the one that we want right now is add to selection. We still want our elliptical marquee tool. And now what I'm going to do, I start in the upper left hand corner. It works the best for me. If that doesn't work the best for you, you can figure out whatever works the best. So I'm going to click and drag out my little ellipse there, and now I still have my mouse button pressed in. I'm going to press and hold the space bar and move that up into the right spot, somewhere around there, and release. And you'll notice that these two little shapes join together. So now they're one selection with both this circle and that circle joined together. That's exactly what we want. Okay, we're going to do the same thing up here. So I'm going to start in the upper right hand corner for this one and click and drag down. It is about the right size right there. I'm going to press and hold the space bar, move it up a little bit, and then I'm going to release both my mouse button and my space bar. So now I have that kind of Mickey Mouse shape. I'm going to create a new layer, and I am going to fill that with a color, whatever color you want. Now that's still selected, so I need to Control D to deselect. If you're trying to fill an area and it's not filling, That might be because you have a different area selected somewhere else in your document. So it's a good idea, good practice to get into, to just deselect when you're done filling in something with color. Okay, so I have one Mickey Mouse created. I want you to create one more down here, kind of freestyle without that little template. So I'm pressing and holding the mouse button while clicking and dragging out a circle. So I have one circle. I'm going to add another circle. Remember, add to selection is chosen. I will add another circle up here, pressing and holding the space bar to move that up into position. Release the mouse button, release the space bar. One more ear over here, so I'll start somewhere around there. Click and drag out. It's kind of hard to tell where it needs to go with that my little measurement coordinates box there. Maybe a little bigger, something like that. And I will release my mouse, release my space bar. There it is. I can put that on that same layer as my first Mickey Mouse, so that's my layer, layer 2. I will rename it. The color of it is going to be something different. Sure, that looks good. Paint bucket, and dump some paint in there. Control D to deselect. Okay, so now I have my Mickey Mouse shapes created. So I'm going to name them Mickey. This one right here, I'm going to zoom out so you can see. If I turn the visibility off on that one, then you can kind of tell what it is. So notice my cloud one is visible and then not visible. So now I know that's my cloud. So I will name that guy Cloud. Perfect. Okay, let's keep moving on. We are cruising now, right? I'll zoom in a little bit, maybe not quite that far. And now what I'm going to do is choose my elliptical marquee tool again. Notice my fixed ratio is still chosen. That's what I want. And now I'm just going to click and drag out a circle. There we go, plain old circle. Create a new layer. Dump some paint in that circle. Sure, that looks good. Again, I'm kind of staying in the same color family. You definitely don't need to. You can make these all the different colors under the sun. Control D to deselect. Okay, so now I switch to my move tool and I can move my circle around. I made it on a new layer, so all I'm moving is that circle. A cool little shortcut I want to show you is I have my move tool selected. I'm going to press and hold the Alt button on my keyboard. Notice my arrows changed to 2 double arrows, a black one and a white one. That's telling me that it's going to copy it. So I'm going to click and drag out with my mouse, copy. I do the same thing. I haven't released that Alt button yet. So I'm going to make 5 total circles. And there we go. We have 5 all in a line. I made copies super easy and quickly. And it's a very, very handy little shortcut. That works in Photoshop as well as in Illustrator. So keep that one kind of filed away for future use. And notice that it created all of those on separate layers. So I can name this circle 1 and then circle 2 and so on and so on. Whoops. To rename your layer, just double click on the name of the layer that's in there. So mine's layer 1, copy whatever, 3. So I will just double click on the name of the layer, name it circle 2. Whoops. Circle 3. Circle 4. Circle 5. Okay, one other thing I want you to do with these circles is I want you to reduce the opacity of them. So right here in my layers panel, notice that it doesn't look like it's a slider, but it actually is. So if you click on opacity, the word opacity, that little slider thing pops up. You can drag that over and reduce the opacity or increase the opacity. Somewhere around there is perfectly fine. I'm not going to give you exact numbers to put in there, but just reduce the opacity a little bit. Make some of them pretty opaque, some of them nice and light, transparent. Let's do one more, and we'll go somewhere around there. Okay, so make sure your circles are overlapping. You can really see the reduction in opacity where the circles overlap because you can see the bottom circle underneath. If those were all completely opaque, if the opacity was at 100% for all of those, we wouldn't see anything different where they overlap. It would just be all solid color. So a couple little cool ways to change things up there. Okay, our last tool that we're going to cover is the magnetic lasso tool. Okay, so up here we have our lasso tools. We are going to choose the magnetic lasso tool. That one kind of does a decent job of finding differences in value. So it's going to find the difference between this white value and the black value. In order to do that though, we need to tell it the right layer to work on. So right now, the active layer is my Circle 5 layer. That's not the one I want. I want the background. Okay, so my background is highlighted. That's perfect. And now I'm gonna start in the upper left hand corner. You can start wherever you want. So I'm gonna click once there and just pull my mouse down, and then I'll click again down here. I'm clicking and releasing the mouse button. It makes a decent, it follows along the outline decently, but not like perfectly. So if you want it to kind of, or if you want to kind of help it, it's kind of a good habit to get into, to sort of drop these anchor points along the way. But try to stay pretty close to that outline and you should do a pretty decent job. So you'll notice I'm going to deselect and start over. So I click and release, click and release, click and release, and now this big curve, I might drop a couple of little anchors down along that curve. Okay, and then when I get to the point where I started, you'll notice there's a little circle that pops up below my cursor, my magnetic lasso cursor. That means I have completed that selection. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. So when I do that now, I click once and then I get those marching ants. So let's just say I click and click and click and click and I get it all mixed up and it goes wacky and I can't find where I started, so it keeps going wacky. What you can do is double click and it should make the selection for you, and then at that point you can Control D to deselect and start over, because that has happened to me. So I feel your pain if you ever do that. Like I said, just kind of double click in the same spot and it should complete the selection, and then you should be able to deselect it and start over. Sometimes it kind of locks up your computer, so hopefully it doesn't do that. If it does do that, then you'll just have to shut down Photoshop and or the computer and restart it. So it's a pain in the butt, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, sorry, I made that one wacky. I just wanted to show you what we're doing with that. So create your selection, do a little bit better job than I did. New layer, and fill that with color. Okay, so color, you can choose a color, dump some paint in there. Yours will look better than mine. Okay, I'll deselect that guy. And now just go ahead and do this last one. Make sure again that you come down to the background layer, choose your magnetic lasso tool, and then try to follow along pretty carefully with the outline. Where did I start? So somehow I missed where I started, so I'm going all the way around again. Okay, so you remember what I was just saying about not being able to find where you started? I thought it was up there somewhere, but it's not popping up. Or it is, and I just can't see it because it's kind of a mess. Okay, so I'm going to double click and deselect that guy. It would have been fine, but I don't want to lose, right? I don't like to lose, and I feel like it was beating me right there. So it gets a little bit confusing when you're going over this diagram, but that's what I'm looking for. I don't know if you'll even be able to see it. It's that little circle. That tells me we completed the selection, and there we go. Selection completed. New layer. Oops, new layer, and put some color in there. There we go. Okay, so that is it. I'm going to Command D to deselect it. I will save this as, you can save it as a PNG file. Make sure that it has your first name and last name in that file name. So File, Save As, first name, last name, selection tool, or whatever you want, and then save that as a PNG. If you can't save it as a PNG for some reason, save it as a JPEG. And go ahead and submit that in Classroom. All right, have fun with that one. We should be able to start on our project here coming up.